Thanks to be here for this talk. I assume everybody here is a backend developer. Who is here is an Android developer? Oh, that's going to be an interesting talk because I will be talking about Spring. Are you sure you are in the right room? Oh, you use Spring on Android? I thought it was deprecated. Okay. Yeah, at some point they ported Spring to Android and then decided it might not be a good idea. I'm Nicolas Fränkel. I'm a developer advocate for a long time. And still, perhaps nowadays, I'm a developer. For a long time, I actually coded in Java. And I tried to teach myself Android a couple of years ago. And I found that the Android API was awful, really awful. And I thought, how can I make it better? Because I found myself working in Java on Java application servers 20 years ago. Yeah, I'm that old. And then I saw Kotlin. And the funny part is I already did conferences. And at those conferences, I frequently met with Svetlana Isakova. And I never attended one of her talks. Because I said, Kotlin, what is that? And then with Android, I saw that it was, Kotlin was pretty used on Android, and it actually made the API much, much nicer. And yeah, I stopped Android, and I continued Kotlin on the back end. I work for a company called Hazelcast. Who have heard about Hazelcast? 2 persons, 3 persons, 4 persons. 5, no, 4.5. Okay, so this talk is not about Hazelcast, but since they were kind enough to send me here, this is just an intro slide that might interest you anyway. So Hazelcast is an in-memory distributed data grid, meaning you can put value in memory on one node, and it will be available on other nodes because it's clusterized, it's replicated. We have a lot of data structures, but in general, people only use the hash map, like key value store for the win. In version 5, actually what happened is we added one more feature, which is stream processing. So you can read data from a source, do some transformation, distributed. That's very cool. Filtering, what have you, enrichment, then you can sync it to another place. There are a lot of crazy use cases for that. I leave it up to you to check if you're interested. So for those of you who are not into the backend, then actually this is a small intro of Spring. So Spring is an open source project, and at the beginning, its goal was to ease the development of Java application on the backend. And at the time, who knows about EGBs? Yeah. Who did EGBs too? No. You are that old? Yeah. I'm sorry for you. I'm really sorry. So the point of EGBs at that point was to be an improvement over CORBA, over distributed objects. And the fun part is if you wanted to create an EGB service, then you had to create 7 classes. Manually create 7 classes with all the interfaces that you needed to implement. And of course, let's say it was not super fun. You agree? He agrees. And so Spring started from this. And after a while, Spring became very successful. And actually what happened is it was so successful that it integrated a lot of different libraries. And I worked for Spring for a long time. And when I wanted to create a new project, I said to my team, folks, do something else. I will create the Maven POM. Just like you build.gradle, there is the Maven POM because I hate Gradle. I am a declarative kind of guy. And so I had to create the POM by myself manually checking every dependencies, checking that everything was aligned. And it took me, let's say, 1 day, 1.5 days, depending on the size of the project. So Spring Boot was the idea that, hey, let's make it like easier. We will do that for you. And also, in Spring, everything is based on beans. So even if you are Android developers, probably you are using Dagger or Google Juice or whatever. And so you know about dependency injection, about creating beans that you inject into one another. And for a lot of projects, you had to redeclare always the same beans. Like how do you route like a string to a view in Spring? Well, you have an internal view resolver, and you have to create it for every web project. And say, hey, that could be a good default. So let's create implicitly those beans. And that's the idea of convention over configuration. With Spring Boot, if you've got the Spring Web MVC starter, it will create a bean of internal view resolver bean for you. But there are also a lot of stuff. Why do you hear me breathing in the mic? It's not great. Yeah, a bit. I hear myself. And also, everything is based on annotations. And some people recently started to hate annotations. So on Java 4, there were no annotations. Then Java 5 came, annotations. What did everybody do? Use them. Overuse them. Till no one, the world's end. And so the idea is, I mean, the world is just like a pendulum going back and forth. Before we had no annotations, we were like complaining. Well, at least I am complaining because I'm French, so that's normal. A lot of people are French here, so you know what I mean. And so we got annotations. Now people are complaining, hey, too much annotations. Okay, let's remove all the annotations and do everything by hand again. I guess that in a couple of years, we will get back to like the other side. But hey, that's life. That's how consultants earn their money. Okay, I've talked a lot. Perhaps I should show you some codes. If at any point you've got questions, I will be very happy to be interrupted, because during the lockdown, I did a lot of online talks. I talked to my screen. It never asked questions. So here we are happy. It might be, for me, it's the last on-site conference of the year. So if you've got questions, feel free, raise your hand, ask me questions. So here I've created a Springboot project. I was trying to use the latest starter, but actually I couldn't, because afterwards, in the end, I will do like even more magic, so I need to be compatible. So the latest one is 2.6. Here I'm 2.4, which is not that bad. I'm using Springboot starter data GPA, so GPA specification to get the data out of the database without writing too much SQL, to have entities, the web to have controllers, to route your stuff. And then it's a Kotlin project as well, because I love Kotlin, as I mentioned. And in the Spring Boot world, well, in the Spring world, Kotlin is a first-class citizen, and I will show you like some more stuff. And because I'm super lazy, I'm not using a dedicated database. I'm using H2, but it's the same. It's just like a SQL database that works in memory. Now, as for the project itself, I have a single file, because I'm super lazy. You know, in Java, you have to write like one file per class. Who loves it? I don't. So here, since my classes are very small, I put everything into the same file. And I have a person controller. And this person controller is injected with a person repository. I've got two mappings, one to read all the entities, the other to read one single entity. I have my entity class annotated with entity. This is the GPA specification. It's not Spring Boot. And here I have what I love. I have the person repository. I just extend the paging and sorting repository. And though it's an interface, at runtime, I will get a class with all the magic. I love it. Some don't. And now I'm running it. And as you can imagine, well, a demo that works. Curl localhost 8080/person. Ooh, it works. So I've got 3 entities already. The reason for that is I'm using this import script. Springboot detects it, and it will, when it starts the application, it will insert those values into the H2 database. Likewise, here I have, again, some more magic. I have a YAML file that, I have a properties file that defines the Spring Jackson serialization indent output true, which means that here I don't need to use JQ or whatever. Everything is indented by default. Works for you? Great. So here, as I mentioned, I want a bit of interaction. Where do I have the most annotations? There is no trick, huh? Really, don't be afraid. Controller, yeah. So since Spring Framework 5, you can actually remove the annotations on the controller and to remove the concept of the controller itself, because the controller comes from the MVC2 patterns, and it has the concept of routes. So instead of having like a class that you annotate specifically, because yeah, it could be an interface, but it wouldn't mean anything, so you annotate it, and then it's registered, then you assign like path to functions, and functions takes server requests and return server response. And because I would love to do live coding, but I'm always a bit afraid, I have everything in Git. So pretend that I am coding very, very nicely. And here it is. So I actually add, how many annotations did I add? Remember how many? 2? 3? Who says 4? 4, yeah? Actually, I had 4. Because I had the REST controller, the get mapping, and the pass variable. I had two controllers, 2 get mappings. And I replaced it with 1. Net worth, I won 3, which is good. And now I'm using this route stuff. So I'm doing exactly the same. I'm injecting the repository, and then I'm associating, as I mentioned, I'm associating like a path with a handler function that, accepts server request and returns server response. And even here, Kotlin tells me, IntelliJ tells me, hey, you can remove it, and it's not necessary anymore. But let's keep it like this for the moment, and let's compile it again. And since I'm using DevTools, normally it should work. It should recompile. And I should have started in debug, so I will restart. Normally, when you start in debug and you recompile, if you have Spring DevTools, it reloads the code. I just want to make sure that everything works as expected. Yes, and I can query for 1. Yeah, still works, still good. But we can do better, definitely. Actually, this handler function, we should move it to its dedicated class. So that's one of the things that's a new pattern with like functional routing, is that you move this handler function to a dedicated class. So the logic itself of like mapping the server request to the server response is here. The question so far? You can see this is not that great. Now I have myself to extract the variable from the path and then to transform it to a long, which I didn't have to do before. Like Spring did it for me, but hey, you asked for no magic. If you ask for no magic, then you do everything explicitly. Whoops. Next. This is Java stuff. So even that you can do in Java. But actually, I told you, Spring loves Kotlin. And so we have a dedicated DSL for that. Because have you ever tried to write a DSL in Java? That's not funny. That's painful. And you are pretty limited because the primitives that you are able to use, they are few and far between. Basically, you can have like fluent APIs. So if you use assert4j, then yes, and that's all. But Kotlin gives you a lot of primitives to build from, and especially like this, like Lambda with receiver. Everybody knows about Lambda with receiver? Yeah. So here I have this router function DSL, and here I have defined a Lambda, and everything that goes here will get executed in the context of the router function DSL. So now, normally, I should recompile. It should tell me, hey, I've loaded. Yes, it works. Loaded the codes. Now, if I check again whether this works, it still works. And this is much nicer to read. And I believe even if you are not a Spring Boot developer, even a Spring developer, you can read that stuff. Great. But we can do better. Not only do we have a route DSL, we have a beans DSL. DSL for the win. And so we removed our add beans annotation. And look, this is how it looks. So instead, again, of having just a simple annotation, now we can create a dedicated function that we call in the initialization. So again, if we forget to do it, no beans, too bad, tough luck. But so far, it works pretty well. And here, can somebody tell me what it does? Because you remember that my person handler requires a person repository. And here, I have a magical function call that tells, hey, get it. Again, I think it's the right answer. Yeah. You are quick. So it's an inline function that will get the reference from the repository. Everybody understand that bit, right? Who doesn't? Hey, don't be afraid. I have yes, thanks. Because otherwise you will remove 10 minutes of my presentation. If everybody understands it, thanks. That's fine. We are all between ourselves. Sorry. So here I will create a new Kotlin, and I will call it magic, because this is obviously magic. And normally here I will say just magic, and I hope it works. Yes. Okay. So forget about this for the moment. And so I am inside this bean definition DSL, and I will define a bean that say, hey, imagine that ref is actually, I will get it from the context because I can access the Spring context, and I will do get bean of the type welcome repository. And actually, it's not welcome repository here. It should be person repository. And here it should be person handler. Yep. That is like codes that make sense to you. Yep. Again, you can tell me no, that's fine. No? Nobody will tell you anything. The problem here, of course, is that it tells me that, hey, you cannot access context because it's an internal implementation, but here I'm doing it explicitly. That would also work. The next step is, why are we passing this class here? Because what we could do actually in Kotlin is we could do something like this. We could. The problem is we are working with a Java code base. And within the Java code base, what happens is we need to type this saying, hey, I need a bin of type person_repository.class because generics, simple generics, wouldn't be enough because generics would get erased at runtime, and so at runtime, the framework wouldn't know which type it should find in the context. So we need to pass that, and of course, if we pass it here, this becomes not necessary at all. Okay, but here is the magic. I forgot to refresh it. What if I could do that erasure doesn't exist in Kotlin? This is obviously wrong. Yeah, this is wrong. You can tell me, hey, you are wrong. That's fine. Of course, because we are writing bytecode, and bytecode is JVM bytecode, so there is no such thing as, hey, this bytecode is different in Kotlin, and we can sneak in some type. But what we can do is we can have, as you said, used generics that are reified with inline. And so instead of having a function call, we can, well, not we, but the compiler can copy-paste the code. And because it copy-pastes it, then it's not a runtime call, so there is no type erasure. And that's exactly what this stuff does. Not this one, obviously. Sorry? Thanks. Thanks a lot. It's not this one I wanted, so I wanted to have ref directly. So that's exactly what ref does. It tells you, hey, we will be using type T, which is reified, but it can only work if you have inline, because reified without inline doesn't make any sense, again, because of type erasure. So you were right, but you didn't dare to tell me I was wrong. That's fine. And so now my code is much, much better. We can just say, hey, person handler